I'm Cassidy Quinn, and this is Mentally Together. Because whether you can see it on the surface or not, we are all just trying to keep ourselves mentally together. And no matter what our brains are experiencing, we're not alone, we're together. And this week, you get more of just me talking about grief and all the sad things, because I asked you, the listeners of Mentally Together, actually specifically the ones of you that follow our Instagram account, which is at Mentally Together Pod. If you're not hanging out with us over there yet, I put a poll up over there earlier this week or last week and said, okay, for next week's episode, would you rather hear another interview episode with a guest talking about their mental health, or would you like more of me talking about my grief? Because if you haven't listened to the episode I put out about a month ago, it was our first episode of the pod in months. So if you look back on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, all the places you can listen to and watch Mentally Together, there was a hiatus. So basically just look for there were missing episodes, and then she's back. Because if you have not heard anything that I've been talking about or posting on social media, my mom passed away. Now it's been 3 months ago, which is crazy. That is a quarter of the year. My mom used to be a math teacher, so maybe that's why my brain is just counting always, but I think that's also just a normal grief thing. But I asked you guys, what would you rather hear? And every single one of you that answered the poll, that clicked that button on Instagram, voted grief. So I don't know what's going on. All of you just want to be sad and sit in our feelings together. Just kidding. That's what we do on every episode. We are open about our feelings. We sit in the feelings. We don't hold them back. Except we will get to me talking about how I have been holding back some of my grief feelings lately. So we'll get there. But I think really what this shows is that grief and loss and the pain and sadness that come with it, those are things that we don't hear talked about a ton of the time, except now that I have been talking about it out loud and on the internet and on the podcast, my phone, just for the record, has been sending me so many grief-related accounts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, everywhere. It's like, this page is something you might be into, and it's someone writing a poem about grief. And yes, phone, you're right, I'm into that, so I've been following a lot of them. So I've learned that there are people in the sad corners of the internet talking about grief. But unless you have found your way to one of those corners somehow, then you might not know it exists. And so if you are grieving, or you ever have been at any point in your life, because unfortunately I don't think any of us get out of living without having to do this, sadly, you might feel very alone. And that is literally the point of this entire podcast, is to help us all feel less alone in whatever it is that we're feeling. If it's a diagnosed mental illness, if it is grief that we are going through, whatever it is, we don't have to do it alone. But it also is no surprise to me that all of these things can feel very lonely. Even grief. I wrote this note in my phone the other day, because this quote or these words popped into my head, that grief is lonely, but I am not alone. And honestly, you could take out the word grief and insert depression, anxiety, ADHD, whatever it is you are struggling with that feels very lonely, you could put that there. But for me, it is grief is lonely, but I'm not alone. For me, what that means is, yeah, I am the only one experiencing my grief, the loss of my mom, in this exact way. My dad is grieving. My brother is grieving. My mom's sisters are grieving. Anyone that knew and loved my mom is grieving, because grief is love, but no one is experiencing it the exact same way. And sometimes, for me, that has been very isolating, because I can think to myself, no one gets this. No one understands it. No one has gone through this exact specific thing with this exact person, with my exact headspace and mental space, which, yeah, is true. But also, once I started talking about this on the internet, so many of you reached out and said, I get it. Thank you for talking about this because it sucks and we don't talk about it enough. And I have been feeling very lonely and sad in my grief because of the loss of my insert human or animal here, my dog, my grandma, my dad. And unfortunately, nobody can do your grieving except for you. I have learned like I have to do it. I can't put it on somebody else to go through it and process it. And even my therapist, right? Like, yeah, she can help guide me and ask me questions and think about things in specific, better ways. But she can't do it for me. I have to do the grieving myself. And so therefore, it can be lonely, but also I am not alone. I do have all of those other people I just listed who are also very, 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 very sad and heartbroken that my mom is gone. And I also have every other human out there listening who has ever lost someone or something. So I did ask you guys if you had any questions for me about my grief or grieving in general, and just so I can say it very, very clear, just for the record, I am only talking about my own grief, my own feelings. I am not trying to say that if you are grieving or ever have grieved or go through grief, how many times have I said grief already? We're only a few minutes into this podcast, but I'm not trying to put out any blanket statements or say that I know anything about this. I only know my own experience, and honestly, some days I can't even describe my own experience. So I'm just saying how I feel right now and hoping that somebody out there can relate or get something from it, because lately I have gotten so much from reading about other people's grief or listening to podcasts or reading books about people's grief, and it really does make me feel less alone. And I hate that there's so many people that have to grieve and be sad at times in their lives, but I'm glad that we can talk about it and be there for each other. So I will get to some of those specific questions you guys sent over in just a little bit. But first I want to talk about, in general, what has helped me, what is helping me right now, because that is something so many people have asked. And it's also a very difficult question because some days certain things help, other days other things help, and that's just how it goes. Some days my brain feels like, oh, my mom's gone and that's sad, but like I can get through the day, and then other days it's like, oh my God, my mom is gone. I can't do this. So that's fun. So what has been helping me lately? Honestly, lots of time with my dog, Summit. He is really wonderful and cuddly, and he also is 85 pounds, so he needs a lot of exercise. And so we've been going on a lot of long walks, and that's been really nice, even when it's raining. I thought I would hate walking a dog in the rain. Turns out it's not that bad. It's kind of nice. Plus the rain, if you're crying, like you're already soaked, so it doesn't matter. And when we go on our walks, we always find my mom. Not like literally find my mom. Obviously, that would be really weird and creepy. But finding signs of her, that she's out there. Like, my mom really loves frogs and fairies. And so the other day, I found this little ceramic fairy that was painted all these rainbow colors sitting in somebody's yard. And yeah, maybe that fairy has been there in their yard for years and years. But in my mind, that was my mom saying hi. Or my mom was or is a big fan of the Beatles, and the other day we were walking through our neighborhood and I saw a sign post outside of somebody's house, like with their house number on it, and they had painted it all these fun colors, and it had a Beatles lyric. It said, "You say goodbye, I say hello," and that made me cry and say hello to my mom, because yeah, again, they might have had that thing in front of their house for years, who knows, but it felt like my mom actually saying hello to me. And maybe there's somebody out there, like a therapist or a doctor or something, listening to this and thinking, Cassidy, Are you losing your mind and imagining that you are seeing signs of your mom out in the world? But I don't want to hear it if you have that to say, okay? Because feeling like my mom is everywhere is really wonderful and genuinely makes me feel better. And maybe you can relate to that if you have ever lost someone, because yeah, we lose them from this world, and from being able to physically give my mom a hug or pick up the phone and talk to her right now, which for the record, I almost sent her a text message the other day after I got a haircut. And then I realized I couldn't, like, she can't get a text from me, but I can talk to her out loud all the time. Like, if the universe can do what the universe does, if we can all be human beings living in this world somehow with these bodies, with a soul inside a body, with a brain that works and comes up with these crazy inventions, then how can it not be possible that when my mom's physical body is gone from this earth, her soul is popped up everywhere sending me signals and is always with me? Like, how is that not possible, right? Also, for the record, yes, I am totally sober right now. That sounded like a thought that would come up when my brain was not sober, but it is. That's just the grief brain. Oh yeah, I've been mentioning grief brain to a lot of people, and basically what that means to me, since I didn't understand that, like, your brain on grief is actually different than a, quote, normal brain, or like the normal state of my own brain. My grief brain has been very, very tired, very, very foggy. That's definitely how I'm feeling today. But now that it has been 3 months since my mom passed away, I feel more days where my brain is more fully functioning. Like, my energy has been coming back, but then there's still days in the week where I have to just give into it and just rest and not push my brain too hard, which honestly, maybe today is one of those days. My brain doesn't feel super functioning, but we're doing the podcast anyway. So, okay, what else has been helping me? My usual things of meditating and writing in my journal, which yes, some days I still avoid. But when I do them, I can genuinely tell that it has my brain in a better spot, or at least in a spot where I can be aware of what's going on in my brain. So I can go, oh, you know what? I'm actually feeling really sad today. I probably shouldn't go try to socialize, or I'm really tired. I should probably get some extra sleep tonight, or stop binge watching whatever stupid reality show I watched until 2 o'clock in the morning last night. That sounds so simple, but it has been huge for me to just meditate, sit with my thoughts and feelings, see what pops up, see what we're dealing with, writing in my journal to also see what words actually come up, because a lot of times I sit down and I say I'm going to write in my journal for 5 minutes and I'm like, I don't have anything to say today. I don't know what I'm thinking about. There's nothing in my brain. And then I start writing, and there are a lot of things that I have to say, and like 20 minutes later, I'm still writing thoughts and feelings out on paper, and I go, oh, that's what was in there. Got it. But it sounds so simple, but just knowing how I feel is a huge part to feeling better, or making progress, or not making myself suffer more than I have to in any given moment or feeling, if that makes sense. One thing I know has been helping that I still have a tendency to avoid a lot of the time is just getting quiet and being with my thoughts and feelings. And I don't mean just not talking. Obviously, I'm a talker, but I also have a tendency to fill the silence with something, whether that's watching a show, listening to a podcast, listening to a book. And a lot of times that has been really helpful, like putting on something to listen to, and just cleaning my house has been really nice and therapeutic, like organizing and decorating. And it feels, quote, productive, but not like I'm forcing myself to do too much work. But I also have realized that I need time where there's no voices besides my own playing in my head. No books, no podcasts, no shows, just silence, so I can hear what's going on in my brain. And that, just for the record, is very difficult for me. And so the way that has worked for me to do it lately is going on walks or a hike or something, like going outside, getting some fresh air, maybe playing some meditation music in the background in my headphones so that there's like a little bit of calming sound so that every time someone honks their horn of their car or a dog barks, like that doesn't interrupt my brain. But if I just play some calming music with no lyrics, no voices in the background, and I just listen to that and I just see what feelings come up. And then sometimes, I think I mentioned this the last time I talked about grief on the podcast, that I will record voice memos and just talk to my mom. And I like that. But also, like I said, I can have a tendency to avoid doing that altogether. And I know I like to say on this podcast, yeah, talk about your feelings, talk about your mental health, be open, look at me. Well, yeah, sometimes not so much, because hard feelings are hard. And so there have been times where I'll go a few days, even a week, and I'm busy. I start doing more work. I start doing something fun with friends. And I'm like, yeah, I'm doing okay. And then one day I'll wake up and it just hits me and I have to be really sad. And I just have to give into it. Like, designated sad time is necessary. And if I don't make time for it, it'll hit me at some point. Now, when it comes to other people doing things that help me in my grief process right now, because that is the biggest question I keep getting from everybody that's like, how do I help someone going through a hard time? Like, what do I do? What do I say? For me, one of the biggest things has been just anybody saying anything. And even if I forget to respond, or I'm too caught up in my sadness that day to respond, or you invite me to something, to 5 different things, 5 weeks in a row, and I'm like, no, not up for it. But then that 6th week, you invited me again, and maybe that time I'm ready and I want to hang out. So the friends of mine that have not stopped sending invites and check-ins, that has meant a ton. Also, so many people have felt bad after asking me, how are you? And number one, you don't have to feel bad. Like, you're just checking on me how I'm doing. Number two, I do that all the time. Like, I'll call my dad and go, hey dad, how are you? And he's like, we do this thing where we both feel awkward about it for a second, because we're like, yeah, that was a dumb question, but also it's the obvious question. Like, I do want to know how you're doing genuinely. So I've been switching it just a tiny bit a lot of the times to say, like, how are you feeling today? Or how is this thing for you today? Because when someone asks me how I'm doing, it doesn't make me mad or sad or anything, but it is a really hard question to answer because that changes on any given moment. A lot of times my answer is, I think I'm doing as okay as I possibly can be right now. And it's not great, but it's not, like, I'm here, I'm alive, I'm getting through it somehow. But so for me, thinking about like, oh, today's an okay day. Or, yeah, today's a pretty good day, actually. Or, today, I'm really sad, really not doing well today. Also, this one took me a long time to figure out that it was helpful, but people asking me things about my mom. Like, last night, Tucker and I went out to dinner, and we had a really lovely dinner for our anniversary, and then we came home, and I was really sad. And he just sat with me on the couch while I cried, and I was even thinking to myself in this moment, like, okay, what would be helpful for him to say in this moment? And I didn't know. And he just said to me, your mom would have really loved that dinner. What do you think would have been her favorite thing? And that was just really wonderful and made me feel really good and sad, because obviously I wish my mom could have been there having the dinner with us, but it was Mediterranean food, which was one of my mom's favorite meals. And just being able to think about her in that moment, I guess, made me feel close to her. But yeah, just somehow incorporating my mom into a conversation, but not just talking about the fact that she's gone. Like, I was talking about getting my hair cut the other day, and one of my friends that I was talking to said, oh, what would your mom think? What would she say? Because I was asking for advice. And just thinking about what she would say and the advice she would give me, it was nice. I would think that would suck. And I think in the past, when I have hung out with people who have lost a loved one, I've had a tendency to just like avoid bringing it up because it sounds so stupid now, but I know it's what I thought. And so I think there's probably a lot of people that felt the same, that still feel the same way, that like you're going to remind someone that their person is gone. So if you lost your mom or your dad and I bring them up, oh no, now you remember that your parents died. Wow, I'm so sorry I reminded you. No, the person, or I'll speak for me, I am never going to forget, except for those brief moments where I'm like, oh, I should text my mom a picture of my haircut. And then I remember I can't. But other than that, like I know she's gone and I'm always going to be sad about it. And you aren't going to make me more sad by bringing it up. Even if you bring up my mom when we're out to dinner and you say, oh, what would your mom order if she was here? Will it maybe make me cry in that moment? Yeah. But if so, maybe that's just what I needed to let out a little bit of that emotion. And so I want to spend time with the people who I feel safe doing that with, obviously, right? Like not every single person is someone that I need to have these conversations about my mom and my grief. And the people I want around me right now are the ones that it just feels comfortable to do that with. Like the people that understand it, whether that's hanging out with my dad and my brother because obviously they know, and hanging out with my cousins because they were close with my mom, but like it's not their mom, so they can support me, but they also know all the sad feelings that are going around with it. Or even the other day, I hung out with a friend whose dad passed away earlier this year, and totally different situations, totally different parents, but at the same time, there were just so many things that I didn't have to say or that I could refer to, and she just got it. Like, we were talking about the holidays coming up, and we're like, yep, it's just gonna suck. And we don't really have to talk about why it's gonna suck. It's just like, yep, it's gonna suck. Cool, great. You too? Awesome, thanks. My brain came up with a metaphor about grief the other day, that grief is a blender. You know, you hear about these stages of grief that I mentioned the last time I talked about this on the podcast. Can I remember them? Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Yeah, those are the 5 stages of grief, the Kubler-Ross method that you hear about, that you read about, but they didn't label those stages of grief to say that those are the only stages you will go through, or that you will go through them in that exact order, because for me, I bounce all over the place, and that is where the blender of grief comes in. I take those 5 stages, I put in a blender. Some days, you know, you didn't totally blend the anger, so a chunk of anger pops up, or a chunk of depression or denial, and then other days, you start throwing something else in there. You get some anxiety, you get some guilt, you just mix that up in there and see how the smoothie tastes today. Sometimes I am in the blender, getting totally attacked and chopped up into pieces. Other days I'm on the outside of the blender and I'm just watching it, and it's like Zen. I can see the things moving around. Okay, that sounds a little too calm. I don't know if I'm ever watching my grief and feeling Zen, but it sounds like a nice goal. One of the new stages, I'm putting air quotes around the word stages because I don't know if they're stages or just components. One of the new ingredients in my blender of grief lately that I have been getting very close to is fear. And like I was talking about earlier with meditating and just checking in on my feelings, it took me a while to become aware of the fact that it really is fear that has been popping up in all of these different moments when my emotions overwhelm me. Like the other day, or I'll set it up by saying that my mom was so crafty and creative, and she made all kinds of things out of all kinds of materials. But right now, I will talk about the things she made out of clay, her ceramic art. And she made me, for Christmas a couple of years ago, this ceramic flower vase, and it has ceramic flowers. And I finally hung it up in my apartment only like a month and a half ago. And I am always really nervous when I hang anything on the wall if it's something breakable, because I'm worried it's going to fall and it's going to break. But I tell myself, okay, you have to enjoy it. Like, you have to put it up on the wall. And if it falls and breaks, that is okay. However, the other day, Tucker was walking through the hall where this beautiful flower vase my mom made me was hanging, and somehow he bumped it, and I just heard a crash, and I knew immediately what it was. Oh, it just makes me feel so anxious just thinking about it now. And so I ran over to look at it. Actually, I walked very slowly because I was scared to see what actually happened. You know, like when you drop your phone and until you flip it back over and see if the screen is totally cracked, your phone is fine until you know it's gone. Like Schrodinger's cat, right? Is that what that's called? So I go over there, I pick it up, and basically one big chunk of the bottom of the vase has fallen off, and then there's some little pieces missing where those two connect. But hypothetically, I can glue it back together. Oh, but when I saw that it was broken, it just broke my heart. And this was one of these days where a few days had gone by and I hadn't really let all of my feelings come up. I'd been busy doing things and working, and all of a sudden this just broke my grief wide open. And the more I checked in about okay, why am I upset about this? This is okay. I can glue it back together. But what I realized is that I already lost my mom. My mom is no longer physically alive in this world, and losing my parents has always been the biggest thing I am afraid of in my life. So, okay, biggest fear ever has been realized. Now, the next fear is losing her even more. So all of the stuff that I have that reminds me of her, that makes me feel close to her, if I lose that, that's just losing her again. Because right now I can say, okay, I have this shirt of hers, and I have this ceramic thing that she made me, and I have this necklace of hers that I gave her that I'm wearing right now, and I still feel close to her. But what if all this stuff is gone? Then she's really, really, really gone, right? But I have to tell myself that, just like I tell myself that, okay, she's gone from this physical world, but she is still here spiritually, I can also tell myself that if these things are gone, if this flower vase was shattered and I never got to hang it up on my wall again, couldn't even glue it back together, my mom would still be here and be present in many other ways. Also, my brother reminded me when I texted him about how upset I was about this flower vase, that my mom was the queen of gluing things together. She has 20 different kinds of glue in her house, and next time I go up there, I'm gonna glue this thing back together, and it will feel even more like Mom's because she glued together so many things that were broken over the years. So, yeah, but the fear that, yep, definitely fear. Also the fear of just losing memories. Anytime someone asks me something about my mom, oh, what did you do with your mom when you were doing this? Or what was your mom like when you were this age? And I can't remember. Oh, that triggers a lot of fear and anxiety and sadness, because I'm oh my God. Again, it's the fear of her being gone again and losing her again. So that's fun. Can anybody relate to that? Have you been putting off a visit to the doctor of any kind for way too long? I'm talking a flu shot, an x-ray, or even therapy. I know how that feels. You know you need to do it, but sometimes it just seems so difficult. That's why I've started going to ZoomCare. With locations in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Colorado, ZoomCare offers same-day doctor visits that you can book online or from their app. Yep, you don't have to talk to anyone on the phone. They even offer mental health visits, where you can speak to a board-certified mental health provider in person or through video. That's how I've been going to therapy this year, all on my webcam from the comfort of my own couch. Oh, that reminds me, I better go book my next session. If you're ready to make an appointment of your own, head to ZoomCare.com. That's ZoomCare.com.
Now, back to the show.
Okay, now let's move on to some of the questions that you sent me, the questions from the internet. I asked you guys, do you have any questions about my grief in general? Again, I can only speak to my grief and my feelings and my process, and some of these questions are really difficult, but I will try. I will do my best. So, Sean says, is it weird to feel comfort in grief? Ooh, we're just starting on a hard-hitting one. Great. First of all, I would say if you start a question with, is it weird to feel blank in grief? I would just say a blanket no. Again, I'm not a grief expert, but what I have been reading about lately and what I've been experiencing in my own brain tells me that everything is normal. If you're like crying every single day, every second of every day, that's normal. If you cannot shed a tear and your body is just like in shock, also totally normal. Like everything is normal, or I guess there is no normal. Just everything, nothing's off limits. But when you say comfort in grief, that's super interesting because I do think there have been moments or big chunks of time where I do kind of feel comfort in grief. Like the other day, I actually went and did something with friends and it felt nice. But a lot of times lately, I've been avoiding that because I'm like, I'm not ready. I'm just in grief. I'm just doing the grief thing. Okay, that is all I can do right now. And yes, that is the case, but also, like, I can do other things too. I can start to incorporate other things that might be good for my grief, and I don't have to just, like, isolate myself and say, like, this is all I'm doing. I'm just going to sit and be sad. Even though sometimes that is oddly comforting. So, yeah, very astute question, Sean. Mike says, have you been able to recognize any healing in yourself through the grieving process? Ooh, that's a beautiful question, first of all, because obviously there's a lot of healing involved. Some days I feel more healed than other days. But what comes up for me right now as far as healing is I've noticed the voice in my head being able to help me heal a little bit more as time goes on. You know, in the first days and weeks and months after losing my mom, my brain could definitely be mean. Like if I couldn't think of a specific memory, like, oh my gosh, I forgot that. Everything is gone. I am horrible. Was I ever even present when I hung out with my mom? No. What was I doing my whole life? Or, oh my gosh, this is why we can't have nice things. You broke the flower vase already. It's been 3 months since you lost your mom and you already broke this. It's never going to last your whole life. But, ooh, guess the mean voice is still there. Or there's a million different examples I could name right now, but my voice in my head is getting more gentle and more healing in the process of just allowing myself to feel how I feel and not judging myself or putting too much pressure on myself to change that or be able to remember something, you know, going, hey, this is your grief brain. You're tired. You're foggy. Don't push yourself too much. This is okay. And that memory will be there someday. It's still in your brain somewhere. Or, hey, we can fix that vase or whatever it is. Gina says, are you able to separate your grief from your anxiety? Whoa. A friend actually asked me a couple weeks ago, has your anxiety gotten worse since your mom passed away? And in the moment, I didn't really know how to think about that, but I've been thinking about that a lot ever since they asked that question. And in some ways, some levels of my anxiety have been taken away because just like when I was stuck at home during the pandemic, like all of you were, obviously, the lack of having to socialize helped with my social anxiety or feeling like I needed to be doing something all the time and like feeling guilty for not going and doing anything. So right now, just like Sean asked if it was weird to feel comfort in my grief, sometimes I do feel comfortable saying like, no, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to sit here and be sad. And that takes off the pressure to do a bunch of work or a bunch of reaching out to people or whatever. But then in other ways, I think my anxiety does get triggered easier. Like I think it's sitting a little closer to the surface all the time. So when something of my mom's breaks or I lose something of my mom's, like, oh yeah, right now I'm trying to find a piece of a necklace of my mom's and I'm gonna try not to think about it too much, but whatever, hopefully I'll find it or I can replace it. It's okay, I think. But the anxiety can definitely be triggered very, very easily. So again, the question was, am I able to separate my grief from my anxiety? And oof, I would say yes. The depression and the grief, those are also really hard to separate because depression is literally one of those 5 stages of grief they talk about, but it's also something that was already in my brain. And it's also just, yeah, you're grieving, you're sad. Like sadness comes with it, therefore depression comes with it. And where's the line? Like, where is just me being not motivated to do anything and not wanting to talk to anybody and just sit like a blob on the couch all the time? When is that my grief? When is that actual depression? Those are hard to separate. With anxiety, I think grief makes the anxiety more easily triggered, but I can separate it, I think. I guess I can only separate it once I like really get curious about it and sit with myself and go, okay, why are you feeling so anxious right now and overwhelmed? Like the other morning, I was about to go get my hair cut, and like 20 minutes before the appointment, I started having an anxiety attack. And turns out it had been exactly 3 months since we lost my mom. And once I realized that, I was like, oh, hey, my brain was just telling me that we're freaking out about that and we're sad and we're triggered today. Whew, do I still want to go get my hair cut? Will this bring me some joy? Is this too stressful for me? Like, I just have to really become aware of like what's going on, and then I can separate, oh, that is just my anxiety talking, or that is the grief triggering the anxiety. They're teaming up today. And then we can figure it out sometimes. Jackie says, I lost my mom and the holidays suck. Are you nervous for the first round of holidays? Thanks, Jackie. Just kidding. Great question. Actually, my therapist asked me that last week, and she said, okay, next week, let's talk about the holidays. And I said, great, I'm just going to be thinking about that until then and trying to not think about it. Yes, I am definitely nervous for the holidays without my mom. I'm trying, honestly, like mostly avoiding them. Like, I think it's great that everybody's excited about Christmas and Hanukkah and Thanksgiving and everything else and New Year's, but like the most Christmas shopping I have done is see emails about places to do some shopping. I look and I go, ooh, that's something I could buy my mom. Oh, wait, don't get to buy my mom a present. Okay, done. We're shutting off the holiday shopping. So that's the most spirited I've gotten. But at the same time, I am very, very, very grateful that I have my dad and my brother and my boyfriend Tucker, and that we will get to spend the holidays together. And for me, my dad and my brother, like it's going to be really, 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 really weird to do like Thanksgiving, for example. That was always such a family-based holiday, and to not have my mom there. But I'm sure we'll figure out ways to feel that she's there with us. And maybe I will buy her some presents. Why not? John asks, what was the most helpful or resonating thing someone told you after your mom passed? One quote that one of my mom's friends repeated to me, I think like the second day after my mom passed away, was, let me make sure I get it right. Some things cannot be fixed. They can only be carried. Grief like yours, love like yours, can only be carried. And yes, I, having never gone through this whole shitty grief thing before, didn't really understand that like there are things that you cannot fix, that you just have to figure out how to live with and carry. I have a fixing brain, and this is something that cannot be fixed. And so hearing that, which, by the way, that quote is from Megan Devine, and that is from the book that I mentioned the last time I talked about this on the podcast, It's Okay That You're Not Okay. And that book about grief has been so helpful for me. But yeah, that's accurate. Like, this will never be fixed. It will never be okay. But I have to carry it. And there's no choice. And, you know, in the first days after my mom passed away, and it probably happens when anyone passes away, like people say to you, or they said to me, some people say like, it's going to be okay, you will get through this, you're really strong, your mom is in a better place now, at least you had her for 32 years of your life. And I know that every person that said any of those things meant well when they said it, but the things that have, like John asked, resonated or been the most helpful for me is when people are just like, this sucks and it's gonna suck and it's not okay. And I'm sorry that it sucks. So with that, I actually want to read the first page out of that book. Again, it's Megan Devine's It's Okay That You're Not Okay, because that touches on this and I think it's really powerful. So here we go. Here's what I most want you to know. This really is as bad as you think. No matter what anyone else says, this sucks. What has happened cannot be made right. What is lost cannot be restored. There is no beauty here inside this central fact. Acknowledgement is everything. You are in pain. It can't be made better. That's me pretending I'm the head blown, mind blown emoji because, yeah. And we as humans, like, we want people to feel better. We want to make things better. And so most of our instincts are to say something, and this is absolutely how my brain works. Like, I want to say something to someone to make them feel better, to make something better. But when it comes to a loss of a life, you cannot make it better. You can't take it back. It literally cannot be fixed. And so we have to like let go of our ego thinking that we can fix it for somebody because we just can't. But also, I've found myself lately having to let go of the idea that someone else can fix it. Like my boyfriend Tucker, I'll sit and I'll cry to him, and in my head I'm like, what's he gonna say to make this better? And there's nothing, like there's literally nothing. But like I said earlier, it does help when he just asks me something about my mom to like include her in that moment in a way other than like, it sucks that she's dead. Yeah, it does. So on that note, Peggy says, if you screw up trying to support someone in their grief, how do you repair it? I would say that for me, there's no one, like I can't think of anything that's like that somebody has genuinely screwed up trying to support me in my grief. But when someone has said something to me like, this will pass, it will get better, you will be okay. Again, they're only meaning the best out of that, but it's not helpful to me. And honestly, for me, it doesn't mean I'm going to be mad at that person because I know that they're meaning well and I know that that's what I've said to so many people over the years. But it just means that like you're probably not going to be the person that I go to do this grieving thing, and that's fine. Like I can't do it with everybody. I only have so much bandwidth, so does every other person. So that to me is just like, okay, cool. I'll find somebody else to do this grief thing with. So I don't know if it's even necessarily repairing unless you really, really like screwed me over. Or if you as the other person still want to be involved in their grief and you want them to know that you support them and care about them, I would say just like send them another message. Even if the last message you sent them was like, you're so strong, you will get through this and it will be okay. Your mom is in a better place now. That's okay. But just for me, you could follow up and say, hey, just wanted to see like, how are you doing this week? Do you feel like getting a cup of coffee? Do you feel like doing insert this thing here, getting a meal, getting a drink, whatever? Just like pitch an idea. And if I feel like doing it, I'll do it. We are all humans and we all have not experienced grief until we experience grief. And so therefore, unfortunately, there are things that we have to learn the hard way. And we might not know how to support somebody through it until we do it ourselves. But I'm also very forgiving to my past self who didn't know how to do this. Oh, by the way, I still don't know at all. Like now when somebody loses someone, I'm like, shit, I should know what to do here. And I don't. So I think we all just need to be really forgiving with each other because we're all trying to be nice and do our best and we all mean well. Unless you don't mean well, in that case, just stop trying to help that person in their grief because you're not trying to help anyway, right? Wow, what am I doing with this? Okay, last but not least, Renee, what a great question. How do you move forward? How are you fighting the sadness? Whew. I would say when it comes to fighting the sadness, I'm not. Like I'm just letting it be. When I need to be sad, when I am sad, when the sadness bubbles up, like I don't stick a wooden spoon in the pot to try to stop the water from boiling over. I just let the water boil. I let the anger be there, the anxiety be there. I let it all be what it needs to be. And sometimes that's by myself or writing in my journal or talking to my therapist, or other times it's talking to another human in person, like my boyfriend or my dad or my brother or my cousins or my friends. And sometimes actually I have found myself fighting the sadness when there are other people around, which I'm trying to do less of, because even with Tucker the other day, I was super sad and anxious, and I almost went into another room and just did it by myself. But I instead went up to him and was like, hey, can we just cuddle? I'm really sad right now. And so, yeah, I'm reminding myself by saying this now, don't fight the sadness. Just let it be sad and involve other people too, because that's what they're there for. But then, Renee, you also said, how do you move forward? And I don't know. I think the world keeps moving. Time keeps passing, and therefore we are moving forward in time. But also, I only have to move at whatever pace feels good for me. And sometimes that means moving forward or feeling like I'm moving forward and then going backward. And then I feel like I'm moving forward again and then going backward again. And so to answer that question for myself, moving forward to me means not putting pressure on myself to move towards anything specific. There's no goal. There's no end of grief that I'm trying to get to. There's no passing go and collecting $200 on this grief game of life. So moving forward one day at a time, 1 hour at a time, and reminding myself that even when I am grieving and there's so much sadness and pain, there can also be joy at the same time. And that's really hard, because some days I'll go do something and I have fun. And my dad got a new puppy a couple of weeks ago, and that was literally a bundle of joy. Okay, he's tiny, he's cute, his name is Rico. I just want to squeeze him and cuddle him all the time. But then at the same time, it made me really, really sad that my mom wasn't there and that she didn't get to cuddle this puppy, because I know she would love it so, so much. But that's okay. I can still feel happy and feel joy and lovely feelings. And then I can also be sad about feeling those feelings, but I don't have to feel guilty about them. And so as long as I know that all of those feelings are allowed to exist at the same time, coming in whatever waves they come, then I think I am moving forward in my own way. So, I need to stretch. Do you need to stretch? I feel like I should wrap this up. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Mentally Together. Thank you to everyone who sent questions, who have sent me DMs just saying that you relate, or that this sucks, or even if you've sent me a DM saying this will get better someday. I know that it's coming from a wonderful place, because you are a wonderful human. And if you've made it this far into this episode of Mentally Together, I owe you one, a lot. So, I, Cassidy Quinn, will see you next week for another new episode. And in the meantime, I hope you get to do something that feels nice for your brain, whether that's just sitting and crying by yourself, whether that is going on a walk with your dog and seeing if you see any signs from a loved one who you've lost at any point in your life, or go glue something back together that was broken, even if that's your heart. Oh wow, that was cheesy. Because remember, grief is lonely, but you are not alone. And we're all just trying to keep ourselves mentally together. Mentally Together is produced, hosted, and edited by Cassidy Quinn in collaboration with Koba FM, a podcast network that is all about community, baby.